There we are. So, welcome. Welcome, everyone. I'm just so to see each of you and all of you together, familiar faces and new faces. My name is Marianne Rowe. I am a co-founding teacher of Monterey Bay Meditation Studio and a licensed psychotherapist. I'm speaking to you this evening from Pacific Grove, California, which is on the unceded lands of the Ohlone Esalen people. On behalf of Monterey Bay Meditation Studio, I welcome you to this evening of conversation, exploration, and inspiration regarding this time of great change, also known as great crisis and great opportunity, that we and all beings on this planet are experiencing and will continue to experience from henceforth. So, to paraphrase Lin-Manuel Miranda, the world has definitely turned upside down. So, to set some context, a brief context for this evening, the intention for tonight's gathering is to co-create a conversation that is alive with clarity, depth, and inspiration in service of Earth and all of her beings. We will be engaging both hemispheres of brains as we bring attention to the cognitive aspects and the emotional impacts of what is already happening, what is emerging, personal, our global, and our collective fields. The majority of our focus will be created by your questions. As you know, Dwayne and Colleen bring a wide, a deep, and a long spectrum of knowledge, experience, and heart to us and to the world. So we are deeply appreciative of their generosity in sharing things, their inspirations, and their time with us. So before formally introducing our special guest, I'd like to welcome Rebecca Gnauer, who will be providing much needed, for me anyway, technical assistance for us. So Rebecca, if you would just wait so people can see you. And if you have any technical questions, you can send a direct message to her through chat and she will help you out. And I'm going to take care of something that I didn't take care of earlier, which is to set up chat so that chat is set up so that the host and co-host are the people that can see it, so that there any back and forth kind of comments during our time together this evening. So if you have a technical question, you can send your question to Rebecca. And if you have a question for Dwayne and or Colleen, then send the question to me on chat and we'll take care of that. So I also want to make one other introduction because I've been having quite a few tech issues over the past couple of weeks. I thought that it might be a good idea to have a backup moderator in case I mysteriously disappear into the ether. So Mike Apkin has agreed to step in and carry on if my connection becomes irretrievably unstable. So Mike, if you just give a wave so folks know who you are. Great. So, a few tech notes before we begin officially. As you've noticed, I am this evening's session is being recorded, and if you'd prefer not to be seen on the recording, then you can turn off your video. However, if you're okay with being seen, then we do encourage you to leave your video on because it's just so nice to see faces and responses and helps us tune into you a bit more. And if you would, please keep your microphone muted unless you're speaking. And because we are more than one screen tonight, like right now we are at 45 participants, and there may be another 15 or 20 more folks. So because I can't see all the screens at the same time, if you would use the digital hand raising, which if you go down here to the bottom of your screen and look at, there's a thing that says reactions. And if you click on that, there's a bar that says raise hand. And so you can just click on that bar, and you can practice that now if you want. So you just click on that bar to raise your hand. That brings you right up here to the front so that I can see you and know to call on you to ask your question. And then you can also click reaction and click on that same bar, and that will lower your hand so that I'll know that you're done and not waiting with another question. So you can practice raising your hand and then practice lowering it. So a little bit about creating and honoring the container. We have 90 minutes of time here, and so I request that in your asking your questions that you be mindful of sharing this 90 minutes of time with at least 45 people and maybe more. So if you would please keep your questions succinct, and if you need to set a context for your question, then please do so in 1 or 2 sentences, foregoing any long discourse or a preamble to your question. And if Dwayne or Colleen has a question about your question, they will ask. But just please keep your questions succinct so that we can get to as many inquiries as possible over the course of the evening. And it's a way of supporting airspace equity, that everyone who wants to speak has an opportunity to do so. And I invite you to really let your questions come from curiosity. So even if you've had a question in mind, that's good. You can keep that question in mind, but also be open to, as you're listening to what's being said, be open to another curiosity arising and honor that, so that keeps you engaged and working, not so much from what is planned, but what is arising, what is emerging in the moment, which is definitely a practice that we are needing these days, is this fluidity and ability to just step into what's here right now. So dropping into curiosity. So any questions about the technology or the context for the evening before I open with a meditation and then introduce Dwayne and Colleen? All right, we're good to go. So we will open with a meditation to help us land here and to connect with ourselves, to connect with each other, and to connect with home, the planet. And so if you would please, if you're comfortable closing your eyes, allow your eyes to close, or if you prefer to keep them open, just look down at the floor in front of you and let yourself receive the sound of the chime as it comes to you. And we'll begin this meditation with a 1 breath meditation, bringing all of your attention, your sensing, to fully engaging and experiencing 1 deep, long breath. One breath meditation, begin. Exhaling fully and just allowing your body to find its natural depth and rhythm for the breath. And with an exhalation, plant yourself here, feeling your rootedness to this planet, going a little bit deeper with each breath. And then from your roots, inhaling and bringing your attention slowly up through your trunk, sensing what it's like to be in your body. Continuing to bring your attention upwards and expanding it beyond your personal body, branching out to sense the collective space of us being here together. Like individual trees creating a forest. An environment of diversity that together forms a collective that is mutually beneficial and enhancing. Sensing yourself in that way as an individual and as a collective. Now, from this consciousness of collective being, expand your awareness even further to remember and to realize the role of the forest in the life of the planet to which we are expanding, to which we are rooted, from which we are nourished, to which we give life. Being of service. All part of an infinitely expanding creative universe. Evolving into greater complexity and connectivity. Each of us individually and all of us together, playing an essential part. We are all this. We are all that. Dwayne Elgin speaks true when he writes, as we awaken to the aliveness at the core of our being, we are simultaneously connecting with the aliveness of the universe. Tonight, and like forever, we are invited to breathe together into that. Gently and slowly, allowing your eyes to open, letting yourself come in contact with each of us here, all of us together. So, to give a little introduction to Dwayne and Colleen, I'd like to share with you a bit of my personal experience of them. I have been deeply and life-changingly touched and inspired by the expanse of Dwayne and Colleen's vision and the depth of their dedication, by the strength and the courage and the resilience that they have gained through their experience, by the wisdom inspired by their perspective, and by the compassion that's sourced in their heart of their hearts. My experience of the book, Choosing Earth, in the same way that balsamic vinegar or a haiku is an expression of essence, Choosing Earth to me awakens the sleepy mind and it pierces the numb heart by getting to the essence of the impact of what we human beings have done, the current impacts of what we're doing, and where we're headed if we human beings continue on this road. But wait, there's more. Choosing Earth also offers a vision of transformation and specific pathways to catalyze and cultivate an evolutionary leap of consciousness and a way of being that shifts this crisis into an opportunity. All of this is what we've come here tonight to explore together. So we'll begin by a brief introduction, more details of Dwayne's and Colleen's work, of their bios, and there are many, but more details can be found on the Choosing Earth project. So Dwayne has been dedicating his attention, his energy, and his heart to the well-being of our world since the early 1970s. Through his work, which has included senior staff member of a joint presidential congressional commission on the American future. It's a big assignment on the American future. Senior social scientist with the think tank of Stanford Research Institute. Dwayne was seniors before he was a senior, so he's been at this for a while. He's been a keynote speaker to over 300 events, a workshop facilitator, a teacher, a project designer, and a director, co-founder of several nonprofits. And in his spare time, he's written 6 books and continues to be a devoted father, grandfather, and husband. Colleen is the producer, the director, and the co-writer of the documentary film Facing Adversity, Choosing Earth, Choosing Life. And if you've not yet had an opportunity to view that film, please do. It's on the Choosing Earth Project website. It's really a quite moving and inspiring film. For over 15 years, Colleen has been the creator of documentary work focusing on pioneers of consciousness and spiritual growth. And she continues to be a facilitator of groups focusing on the great transition, on meditation, cooperative inquiry, community health, and environmental awareness. And she is also the co-director and co-creator of Choosing Earth Project. So enough of Marianne talking. Let's get this thing rolling. So I'd like to invite Dwayne and Colleen, if you would like to start us off with some opening remarks about whatever you feel moved to share as a beginning for this gathering, and then we'll go into questions. And Dwayne, we'll hear you better with the microphone.
There we go.
You got it.
Good. So first of all, thank you, Marianne, for hosting this gathering. And thank you all for showing up, being here for this really challenging inquiry into humanity's future. What an extraordinary time. As context, I was thinking earlier today about how to understand the changes at work in the world right now. And I am mindful of a spectrum of views, and they're legitimate views about what is happening in the world. And I think in some ways, before me putting out more about my particular view and our view, it is to honor and acknowledge the spectrum of views that are out in the world right now. And I am hoping you all will recognize essentially nearly all of them. And so a first very significant view is that, well, what problem? There's no great problem, and we can essentially ignore what seems to be a problem by a few and just keep on with life as it currently is. So one approach is to say, well, just ignore it. Another approach is to say, well, let's exploit it. We are in a time of climate change and resource depletion and all the rest. There's money to be made. Let's exploit this in the short term for our well-being in life. So a second point of view, well, let's exploit it. A third is, well, let's fix it. Let's mobilize all the technology we can, and within a single generation, and there are books out there now of prominent authors that are saying, yes, we can solve the climate crisis in one generation, just mobilize the technology and such, and we can do that. So ignore it, essentially exploit it, fix it. Another perspective says, well, it's not clear if we can fix it, so maybe we should surrender to what is happening. Just give up and say, well, let's adapt as best we can to the world that's rapidly emerging, and find the basis of survival probably in smaller communities. Another view of surrender is to say, well, it's out of control. Let's give it over to bureaucracies and authoritarian governments, whether at a large scale or a smaller scale, and let them handle things. And as we go down the list of responses, one that we are bringing forth says, well, let's go through it. Let's recognize this is a time of maturation for us as a species, and let's grow up, move from our adolescence as a community and into our early adulthood, and take responsibility for the well-being of the earth and other people, other life, and so on. Other people are saying, well, that's foolish. We can't actually go through it and fix it and so on. We're already in overshoot and collapse, and we're destined to either functional extinction or effective complete extinction of humanity. Now, there are other points of view out there, but I just wanted to lay out my appreciation, recognition of the spectrum, of that extraordinary spectrum of views that is resident in the world right now. And this is a very confusing time because they each have their legitimacy, their grounding, and so we are contending, trying to sort through all these different perspectives and find our pathway through. And so that brings us then to the work we're doing here. And also to the wonderful work that Colleen has done laying out in her film, facing adversity and looking at the future that we can choose with an understanding of the world that we're actually in. So I want to turn it over to my wonderful partner, Colleen, and ask for her to contribute her views.
Well, I think that, what I could add to that is just that, yeah, the whole systems crisis is maybe a part of it that's not fully recognized yet. We are recognizing there are challenges, maybe a little bit that there's some opportunities within them, but that how it fits together, and that's important for understanding how to move through it. So that, as Dwayne said, the wide, deep, and long, and Marianne, the deeper aspects of it are so important. If we're going to be able to move through this, we have to understand the deeper and recognize in the body the deeper changes that are necessary. So I think we'll be talking about those more tonight, but just to put that out.
Thank you so much. Thank you. So I have some questions myself, but I think I want to just go ahead and check and see if folks here, and I'll throw my questions in, I'll scatter them around, but I want to go ahead and open up the forum for your questions. That those of you who are here, and you can let me know that you have a question by raising your digital hand down there in the reactions, just clicking on the reactions button. And so that's one way. If you prefer to not ask your question directly, then you can just put it in chat, and then I will be checking the chat periodically through the evening and pulling questions from there. So those of you who are ready and raring to go ahead and raise your hands, and we'll get this thing going. All right. Okay. So Jerry, I saw yours first, and then Jeff.
Okay. Thank you. I'll take my hand down now. But thank you, Dwayne, for what you've done. I think your "what can we do once we know" close to the book left us with a good action list, and I certainly very much appreciate that. My question has to do, having arrived at SRI the year after you left and the like, seeing Change's Image of Man, your earlier report, there was what you had looked at that time as possibly obsolescent factors, like mankind different from nature and things like this. They were still living with 40 years later. So in light of that experience, the future that you foresee, the sort of disassembly and then reassembly, do you still see that reassembly happening on the decadal basis that you kind of put in the book, or that's just sort of metaphorical perhaps, and it will take a bit longer for the upside? The downside, I think, may even be on the quicker side based on the new reports, but what about the upside?
Great question. Let's see. Challenging question. I think this is a slow process. I wish it could be much faster. And but part of the work I've done over the years is working with this presidential commission, working with the president's science advisor and other major institutions in our society. And I've seen the glacial pace of change, even when there's compelling evidence of the need for change. For example, I went to my first briefing on climate change in 1975. That's 45, I don't know, more than 40 years ago. And it was clear then to the scientists that if we keep on like we were at that time, within 40 years, we were going to be in big trouble. Well, more than 40 years have now passed. We are in big trouble. But the point is, we knew about it decades ago. So it's one thing to know about these things. It's another thing to be in the mix of societal transformation and maturation and awakening and all the rest, and to see that change from a select few, if you will, to the global many. And this is now a global enterprise, nothing short of that. So what I see is a gradual awakening, if you will. I wish it were quicker, but I do see a gradual awakening underway, and certainly in the last few years with the intense fires and drought in the West, with the floods and rain and such in the east of this country, we're in the midst of a wake-up call. And so the pace of change is beginning to accelerate. And I do think that we're on this roller coaster ride down the roller coaster and into a time of just compelling crisis. And we either step up to the challenges in front of us, or we veer off into one of these other futures that I was mentioning at the outset. So that's roughly my my take on the current circumstances.
Okay. Yeah, the timeline on that recovery, I think just his history of movements tends to show those upswings, I think, take longer than decade steps, perhaps. That's all. Thank you.
Jeff.
Okay, thanks for writing the book, Dwayne. It's a fabulous book. I wondered why you picked decades. Like, was there some reason you picked similar, just decades? And then why did you go out roughly 100 years? Was that an arbitrary decision, or what is it calculated in some way?
Decades were in many ways arbitrary. Portions of the transformation that we've been writing about may be longer, other parts slower, but we needed some way to just lay it out in a timeline looking ahead for the next half century or so that people could get a hold of. And there's enough validity, I feel, to those decades that that I feel comfortable with that, even though I recognize it, as I said, it's somewhat arbitrary. And depending upon our own motivations as a human family and our own capacities to use our tools of collective communication to come together, it could be accelerated tremendously. On the other hand, given our great tendency, it seems, to ignore the obvious that I've watched now for decades, it could take significantly longer. And the timeline that we put out there of transformation in the next half century could be very optimistic, and it could take quite a bit longer. So I don't think there's any magic to any one point of view, but it's an opportunity to inquiry and to go into it and to see how it lands for each of us, really.
Thank you.
Right. So I see Eva has a question, and so we'll take Eva's question, and then there are a couple of questions in chat that we'll go to next. So Eva, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Marianne. Thank you, Dwayne and Colleen. My interest is on the change that you've spoken a little about, the changing of the interior so that the exterior, the outer world changes. Because all the tech and science and whatever, it just seems so completely overwhelming. And I have this, so I wanted to ask about, so maybe if you could reflect a little bit about Earth as us, not us on the Earth, but Earth as us. And that perhaps what we're seeing is an exteriorization of the collective trauma through time that lives in our bodies, that lives in the body of the Earth and the way that we are, what we're creating. And I'm wondering the systems, if if, things really go badly, like what effect does the earth change, however that will look, have on this more universe system? Like the earth has a place in the universe, right? And if it does whatever terrible thing might happen. So anyways, these are my thoughts, wondering for some reflections.
Great. Thank you for those challenging questions. I want to ask Colleen to weigh in here in just a minute because she has a lot of thoughts along these lines as well. One theme that I would raise is that trauma is our teacher. If we weren't traumatized, we wouldn't pay attention. And the sorrow and the challenges of these times call forth our attention and our awakening and our feeling and our sense of compassion for the well-being of life beyond our own personal selves. So if our challenge is to go from our adolescence as a species and into our early adulthood, that transition, that rite of passage, that initiation takes us into a concern for the well-being of other people, the well-being of all life, plants, animals, and all the rest. So the trauma, I think, is an integral part of this whole dynamic. And it's something that we need to honor, to accept, and to internalize and work with in our own lives and to learn from. And then you mentioned the interior dimension of this. And one of the key things that seems to me is the transitions that we're being asked to make is to go beyond seeing the world essentially dead matter and empty space to seeing the world as a part of a larger cosmic system. And the universe itself appears to be a living system, a super organism. So our life is not only a part of a living earth, it's a part of a living universe. And as we see life within life within life, it changes who we think we are and what we're doing here and where we're going. So that to me is an integral part of the time of transition we're going through right now, is to see that we are learning essentially to live in a living universe, and the trauma of our times are pushing us to awaken into that possibility. So, Colleen.
Yeah, to add to what Dwayne is saying, your question about the externalization is really important. Some of that trauma probably is just from pure separation. Our separation creates a certain amount of trauma when you really think about it. And because we're not, but we're living out of a place that we are. And on so many levels, I do feel that people actually have a sense that something isn't right. They know it, they know there's an out of balance, but they're not sure what to do about it. They're pretty overwhelmed. And so, yeah, a big part of it is coming back into relationship, really all the relationships with our own self, with other beings, with life on this planet, and with the planet itself, and even the universe, to recognize that, wow, we're here. How did this happen? Just the miracle. And that we're, in a sense, in a Garden of Eden. The Earth is an amazing planet. When you look out into the universe, it's incredible what's on this planet. So we've been given the biggest gift. And perhaps this journey is about recognizing it even within losing it. This is just an incredible gift to even be alive here. And there's so much for us to learn and to come into relationship with it. So I think you're very right about the externalization. It's a huge, huge part of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Colleen, you're singing my song when you use the word relationship. That's just one of my favorite arenas. So I'm going to shift now for a few minutes to questions from chat. This one is from MJ. MJ, if you want to wave to let yourself be seen. MJ says, I'm curious what Colleen meant by quote unquote, realize in the body. Realize in the body. Please say more about that.
realizing the body. I'm not sure.
Realize in the body,
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
embodying.
oh,
realization.
embodying. I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah.
So the embodiment of, so I think we're all aware, we're becoming more and more aware of many ideas like non-separation, that we're vastly interconnected. But it's one thing to recognize that in our minds, and it's another one to embody it. And we're all on that journey. That's what this is. The whole journey seems about embodying our edges of knowingness, and then bringing that forth in our lives, and so the separation is, we're all learners in it, every single one of us, and we're all teachers as well. So I think that is really one of the cutting edges, is the separation, and then adding what Dwayne says is recognizing the aliveness. If we fully embodied that we were not separate, we would be obviously treating the earth very differently, but we don't. Even if we know it somehow in our head, we're not embodying it. So that's not something we can learn quickly on this call, as we know, but it's something that we could all move toward and help each other with. Because I truly believe we're all teachers and students of that. And this is a dynamic time of learning how to come into full relationship.
Thank you, Colleen. And I had a message from Wilford that he has a question. And so, Wilford, whenever you're ready, please go unmute and go ahead.
I'm ready. I'm always ready. Hey, guys. Dwayne, you used the term adolescent a few minutes ago. And I find myself increasingly using that term when I'm talking about the human race. The second point is that I see in the work that I've been doing, and you've been doing too, that I think we have about 10 years in which to right this ship. And if we don't right this ship within the 10 years, the temperature to the end of the century will go to temperatures that we cannot handle as a human race. Okay, so time is of the essence, and we're adolescents. My question is, do you feel that we have the maturity and the wisdom to move faster than human time, to wake up and take a mature approach to this? I have serious questions. Then the older I get every day, the more I question whether we as a human race do have that. I'm interested in your comments. Of course, you too, Colleen. That's an easy one. I throw you a bone.
Yeah, I share your concerns, Wilford. I have questions as well. I've been at this for well over 45 years, and golly, we're pushing the edges, it seems to me, needlessly, but nonetheless, not unexpectedly. I've been saying since the early 70s that we wouldn't hit an evolutionary wall until the decade of the 2020s.
Right.
And people have said, well, surely at one point or another along the way, this is it. And I've said, no, I don't think so. Wait till the decade of the 2020s, and then we're going to see really the results of our actions over the prior decades, the prior century, really, and that will then be the catalyst for action or not. Now, I have three sons, and they've grown from their adolescence and into their early adulthood in their 40s, and golly, at times there, I was wondering, are they going to make that transition, that turn, or not? And the adolescence is a time of real danger. And I want to acknowledge the danger that we're facing as a relatively adolescent species, but also that the potential for rapid awakening and seeing and extending then ourselves to the well-being of the world, to the well-being of all life, not just human life, all life, given the interconnection of the world. We can do this. This is a great frustration I have, is that people say, well, it's too late. we've gone too far. We're going extinct. Well, maybe so, but as my estimation, we can do this. But what's required is a collective effort to step up and move into our early adulthood and take charge of our lives in that way. That's a larger conversation. That's a very powerful conversation. But I both honor what you're asking, Wilford, as well as honor that your work over the years, Wilford, has been to say, well, no, let's push ahead. Let's do this. Let's reach into this maturity that we have as our evolutionary potential. So I think we're on this path together.
So if I could tack on, Marianne, so what's it going to take? I mean, what's your gut tell you is what it's going to take to kickstart us to the next phase of human development over these 10 years so that we can address what we have to address as a global community of 7.8 billion people, all fighting with each other.
Right. It's going to take a push and a pull. It's going to take the push of dire necessity, recognizing, as you were saying, we have a decade or so to understand what's happening and begin to turn this around. It'll take the push of great necessity. At the same time, it will take the pull of communications opportunity. Here we are on a planet that has an extraordinary capacity for collective consciousness, collective understanding, collective communication. It's all around us. If it was our ability to communicate that got us from awakening hunter-gatherers to the modern era and the verge of a planetary civilization, it will be our ability to communicate that draws us into that new future. And if we combine those two forces, the push of necessity, the pull of communications opportunity, we can do it. But both are huge challenges in front of us.
Yep.
So that's what I think is required of our times.
Good. Thank you so much.
I want to just tag on to that a question from Barbara that was in the chat, that building commutes from the ground up. And so she would like comments from both Dwayne, both you and Colleen, from you as well, about building from the ground up. Anything that comes to you that you'd like to comment about that?
Well,
Yes.
for years, people have asked us about the situation, that's happening in the world. And often after understanding it, they ask two questions. One is, what should I do with my money and where should I live? And those aren't ones that we have a lot of answers for. We don't have a lot of money, so we're not big investors. And where to live is, that's a complex question. But what we do say, what we do know for sure, and I think this is part of that building, is that your own inner resources, meaning all the things you can do to develop spiritually, psychologically, are going to be so important going forward. Because, to put it very simply, having your mask on first, you can help other people. So when it gets really challenging, just the depth and stability of your own awareness, consciousness, and presence will be so important. And the second one is building community, all kinds of community, whether it's online communities, communities where you live, as many as you can, really being parts of communities. Those are, two things we know for sure as part of that building that are critical. And I guess the third would be engagement. Don't step outside of this. Step in, find your gift in this journey, because we're all, this is about all of us in our lives. This is probably the biggest challenge humanity will ever face. And we need everybody. We need all the gifts, and everybody's got gifts to give.
I really want to emphasize what Colleen said about giving your gifts. Every person has what have been called near gifts and true gifts. Near gifts are things we're pretty good at. Often we're making a living with our near gifts, but each of us has typically at least one, perhaps many more true gifts, things that we're just inspired by and we're really good at bringing to the world. And our situation is so dire that we need the true gifts of people to show up. And it's not for us to say what those gifts should be or are. It's up building from the ground. It's at the ground level of your own personal life to discover and then to say, well, here's my true gift. And it might be poetry or music or organizing or whatever it might be. But that is where we need to be drawing from to really bring inspiration and motivation to the larger world to move at this critical time.
Thank you both so much. So, Molly, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Sure. Question, comment, whatever it might be. I'm struck with how often when people are talking about what should we do, it's as if it's up to us humans. And yes, we have created as humans this situation, but I keep feeling like the life force is so much more powerful than we give it credit for. And we only know about 10% of what's actually happening in the living world. And so I guess I want your reflections on that as how can we collectively tune into and take our guidance from Gaia rather than trying to figure everything out with these little feeble minds of ours.
Great question, great comment. I fully agree. Yes. I say to people, look, 95% of the known universe is invisible. This is science. 95% of the known universe is invisible. Now, we're part of the universe, obviously. And so then I ask, well, how much of ourselves is invisible? And what's going on out there in the invisible realms of each of us, as well as us as a collective? And if the universe itself is a superorganism, in the language of science, a superorganism, a cosmic scale living entity, well, then what happens when we bring our sense of aliveness into accord with the aliveness of a living universe? It's transformative. And we see that our journey is not to exploit dead matter for the well-being of me and mine. It's rather to enter into the aliveness of a living system and learn how to live ethically and happily within it. So we're in a time of profound transition of paradigms right now. And an ancient paradigm has been the paradigm of a living universe. That used to be how we understood reality. And the idea that the universe is essentially dead matter and empty space is a relatively new invention, and it's produced the Industrial Revolution. So it had great power, but it was power without a lot of purpose, without a lot of perspective. And now, given the consequences of the misuse of that power outside of the living universe, we're now being challenged to reclaim the wisdom of the past. And I think you're reaching and touching on that invitation. It's so important.
And I really love what you said too, Molly, in terms of that. Just what you said is a pointer to how we're showing up in relationship. As we do, more will open up. As we shift our relationship to all of life, that's a relationship. Things happen, we can't predict what they are. I don't want to say what those are, but I think you're pointing to something very essential. And that's why, the relationships are key. Waking up to this relationship we're already in, whether awake to it or not. And as we do, more will unfold, so to speak. And I love what you said. Yes, can we trust it? We're all short timers here, so whatever's going to happen, it might be an explosion of awakening at the last moment and the planet becomes inhabitable. We don't know, but we don't know also why the purpose of that is. So let's step up, show up, and move into this time together, and again, thank you. That was a beautiful comment.
Indeed. Leah, would you share your curiosity with us.
Sure, thank you. I just first want to extend gratitude to all three of you for the book, for the movie, and for the group of which I've been a part for the last 8 weeks. And it's been pretty healing for me. My question sort of builds on Wilford's discussion. Reflecting on maybe the movements, the youth movements of Greta Thunberg and the Sunrise Movement and 0 Hour. My question is, how does the youth movement around climate change toy with your developmental concept of the adolescence of humanity, and how might those movements be reflecting resources or positive attributes that we might build upon as we move forward or contribute to the rite of passage that you described?
Great question. Even though we may call it a youth movement, I'm reminded of Greta and the power of this young woman who is calling forth maturity from elders. And she said, grow up, grow up. Here I am. I shouldn't be talking to you like this. I should be in school. Instead, here I am talking to you as my elders and asking you to grow up. Act with maturity. Our world is in crisis. So even though it's a youth movement, there's deep wisdom that's being brought forth from that movement. So that's one comment. Another comment is I see movements like the Extinction Rebellion, which is predominantly youth-oriented, not entirely, but predominantly. And a number of these movements are saying, well, what do we do to get the attention of media? How do we awaken the mass media to what is happening in the world? Well, let's go out and do these various confronting actions in the hopes that we will then be paid attention to by the mass media. And my feeling is, go right to the media. They have, in the United States, for example, broadcast television has a very strict legal responsibility to serve the public interest. This is in the public interest to have a survivable future. Go right to the heart of the beast and say, do your job, not just to the politicians, but actually to the newsmakers, to the media creators, and hold them accountable for reflecting and revealing the what's happening to the public interest. So I think we're still in the early stages of how the youth movement, so-called, will play itself out, and it needs to grow beyond a sense of climate change being the key issue. It's one, certainly. But we're in the midst of a whole systems crisis, and it's climate change, it's species extinction, it's resource depletion. We're running out of water on the West Coast. It is immense disparities of well-being around people of the earth. So it's way beyond climate. It's a whole systems crisis. And bless their hearts for doing what they're doing and bringing the awakening they are, but it needs to grow, both in terms of scope as well as in terms of the tools that are mobilized for awakening the larger politic of the whole world to what's happening.
Well, I would just add that, I think a huge gift, obviously, that the youth are bringing to it is the fire and passion and direct knowing. I mean, the youth are the younger generations, and they're going to be more profoundly impacted. And so there also needs to be some real recognition and invitation for even more participation, because I think that fire that comes from knowing, this is my future, is something that is needed and isn't always found in the older generations, that have their homes and have their lives and are pretty settled with how things are. So I don't know how we do that, but I think it's really important to bring in, recognize, and honor those voices from the youth, for sure, that whole generation. And I also want to speak to that there are many youth that have a hard time dealing with it. We know some in our family that are, of course, aware, and they're aware of all these issues, but it's hard. They have a hard time taking it in. So it's also a challenge. I don't want to always, frame it as the youth know and they're the ones, because a lot of youth are struggling, and that has to be recognized too. They're having a hard time. We work with therapists too, and they've told us youth are coming in really struggling with what's happening on the planet. So we need to recognize the power of the passion and the fire behind them, and also recognize how hard it is for many youth. So both of those.
Yeah.
I
Marianne,
don't know if that's answering your question or not, but
I just want to call on Marianne that she probably has
Yes.
a tremendous amount of
Yes.
experience seeing the responses of youth to this very question. What's
Yes.
your view?
Yes. Well, I mean, just as Colleen was pointing to, the anxiety level is off the roof. And you pair that with the isolation of this past year from not being able to hang with friends, and anxiety and depression is it's skyrocketing. And I mean, and not just in youth, it's also, I'm seeing it also in adults, and that actually leads right into a question that was in the chat from Randy Morris. Let me pull that up and get to that. And Jeff and Leah and MJ, I see you there. And what I'm going to do is circle around to folks that haven't asked questions yet, and then come back to you. So just hang tight, and if there's time, we'll get a chance for follow-ups. So this is from Randy Morris. What are your recommendations for processing the intense grief that will accompany this transition, both as individuals and as a global community?
Wow. This to me is a key question. And I'm in the process of updating the Choosing Earth book right now. And a key part of that update is to ask a dear friend, Francis Weller, who has spent a lifetime of working on grieving and sorrow and more in our personal life experiences, but he has also extended his understanding to communities in transition. And I've asked Francis, help us out, Francis. How do we integrate the trauma of these times, the sorrow of these times, the grief for all that is being lost, the plants, the animals? We're in the midst of the sixth mass extinction of species on the planet. How in the world do we internalize that grief, that sorrow, and rather than incapacitating, have it be mobilizing of our work to engage and transform the world? So bottom line is, I do not have easy answers for this. There is no easy answer for this. I do, as I said, feel that trauma is our teacher. We need to honor the trauma of our times, to recognize it as a catalyst for our own awakening, our own action, our own engagement, to step outside the boundaries of our comfort zones and move into the world in new ways. And if we are acting in the world creatively, that in turn helps us to internalize and integrate the grief, the sorrow that we do feel. So I want to also turn to Colleen as well as to Marianne to respond to this key question.
Well, one of the ways they'll be in community, obviously, and there are grieving circles that are forming, and you can be part of creating those, and the grieving, for it to really encompass what's happening on the planet, we have to recognize also the place we come from, our own privilege in that grieving, because that's an important part of the history of how we got here. And so, including people near where you live that have already had trauma, have already been suffering in different ways, whether it's climate injustice or social injustice, recognizing obviously plants and animals all over. So it's like creating grieving circles that can encompass more on a planetary scale, but also in a very intimate way that goes beyond maybe our own little bubble. So we can extend out of our bubble, because that's part of what the healing will be, is when we can move out of our bubbles into a larger heart space of recognizing the suffering that is going on and has gone on and that will go on with this.
Marianne?
Yeah, and I'll just add a couple of things. First, to the grief circles, there's also the work that reconnects is a very fine program for accessing and processing the grief of this loss of what we love, which is what grief is the human expression of losing something that we love. And the grief, processing the grief is necessary. It's actually part of the healing process. And I don't know who said this, so I can't give credit, but I just love this phrase that grief that's not processed actually becomes grievance. That
Yes.
then it turns, and as the heart is hardened from trying to hold all of this in, then there's a tendency to project that onto others or onto oneself in the form of depression. Yeah.
Good point. Thank you.
So I see Jean and then Michael.
Hi, yes, I'd like your response to, this is my feeling when you're speaking about grief and the new consciousness. Without the new consciousness of understanding that we are the earth, we are the universe, the grief that is now thrust upon us, really, if we're not in denial, is unbearable. But with the consciousness that I am the earth and the universe, I feel that we can both experience paradise and grief, both. And it seems like a dichotomy, but I believe it's true. That we can experience paradise in relationships, in the new understanding of who we really are. And yet, that doesn't mean that we don't grieve. We also grieve because we understand in the depths of what's happening. And I'm thinking that maybe the grief is the way, that the grief will make us into who we're meant to be, because it has such passion in it. And that's, instead of being paralyzed, we will be alive. When you're really grieving, you're really alive. You're really and you have depth. So maybe this is the way. I just like your response to that.
We did a grieving ritual with actually our community, our Choosing Earth community, I guess about 2 years ago. And it was so powerful.
Yes.
Everyone there said it was life-changing, and it was a full day. And I can't go into all the specifics, but we spent the day, and there was poetry readings, there was some movement, there was music, we sang some songs, and we spent some real time grieving at the altar of grief. And it was profoundly, that's why I'm saying it's going to be in community. It's going to be something we need to do together. And because we also learn from each other when we're in those spaces, and we help each other let go into that grief. So it's not something you can easily do by yourself. But anyway, it was life-changing. So I completely agree with what you're saying.
Yes. Thank you, Jean.
Indeed. So, Michael, whenever you're ready.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I just honor you, Dwayne and Colleen, for the work that you've been doing just for decades. And I just want to make folk aware of a resource precisely along the lines of what Jean was talking about and the previous question. For the last year and a half, almost 2 years now, I've been interviewing. I think I've had 78 interviews. They're really conversations, not interviews. It's two colleagues having a conversation called Post-Doom. Regenerative conversations exploring overshoot, grief, grounding, and gratitude. The latest one I just posted was my conversation in February with Joanna Macy, and it's just absolutely, it just rocks. But there's not a bad one. Of all 78 conversations, and they're all 45 to 60 minutes long, but there are people, these are some of the world's top experts who really get the big picture, including both the peril and possibility, and who have moved through the difficult emotions that we all have to move through. You can't get to post-doom without going through doom, unfortunately, but moving through the grief and the stages of grief, and then coming through to this place of inspired local action, passionate, compassionate, generous, love and action. I prefer that to activism, love and action. And so I'm putting into the chat box, I'll send it to Marianne, the best introduction, which is a 25-minute video that I created called Serenity Prayer for the 21st Century, Pro-Future Love and Action. But you can find all of this at postdoom.com. So just postdoom.com is a series of resources, and they're all completely aligned with and supporting what Dwayne and Colleen are doing.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Michael is a dear brother. We have been on this path together for decades. And so I really honor and respect and appreciate the wonderful work he's doing, and encourage you to look at the 78 conversations that he has now hosted.
Yeah. And
Wonderful
Michael's
resource. Yeah.
and Michael's interviews are, I mean, Michael's videos on the same site. So go check out Post-Doom. It's
Yeah.
really good. And the interviews are top notch. And there's a lot of love in it. So thanks, Michael.
Thank you both.
Excellent. Thank you, Michael. And I'll include that on the resource list that'll go out in an email tomorrow. So thank you very much.
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah. And so I want to be sure that we have an opportunity to tap into the documentary film, Facing Adversity, Choosing Earth, Choosing Life. And again, I don't know how many of you have had an opportunity to view that, but I wonder, Colleen, if you would be willing to give us a little appetizer for what's offered there in the film. It's such a beautiful film.
Well, it was birthed really a number of years ago when we first started this work. And it's been challenging to try to keep up with all the data of the challenges, the facing the adversity part. It's been happening so fast. I can tell you, we've spent a couple months just solely doing the research and then doing it over years. And it's been a daunting task to see how quickly the data is changing. And we recognize the film has some limitations. It really is trying to wake people up to the whole systems crisis. And then it turns from the adversity that we're facing to looking at these bigger dimensions of who we are, that grieving is part of it, that's mentioned in the film, that we are part of something much larger, trying to get us to see our place in it and how it matters whether we show up or not. And that it's a developmental process on a species level. So it's, I think it's a way into this work is really what it is. And for some people, it's too basic because they already know it all, but for many people, they don't have all the pieces together. So we tried our best, even with the limitations of it, to bring those pieces together, and also to kind of end it, not with solutions, but with opening, as Molly was doing, opening the field into kind of, can we trust life, So.
One thing I would say about the film and how it's being received by people is that a number of people have told us, I thought I understood this. I'm conversant with the ecological crises and this and that. I thought I understood it. Then I watched Colleen's film, And I realized, no, I actually didn't, because she weaves all these key themes and elements together in a very humane, personal way. And people come away often saying, I didn't grasp the magnitude and the depth of what is underway in the world. And that film was a foundation for me to enter into that understanding.
And we specifically interviewed people across a range of disciplines. So there's Jack Cornfield, a Buddhist teacher, Joanna Macy's in there. Obviously, Dwayne, Beena Sharma, who looks at adult development. So she has a piece in there. Lynn Twist on, the money and wisdom really is her piece. The wonderful the gentleman, Nate Higgins, who's just an amazing person looking at energy and finances in the future. So there's just a range of people in there that are just wonderful. Victoria Santos out of the Whitby Institute. So if you haven't seen it, take a look, please. We'd love for you to share it with others.
I've got to jump in. It's more than that. Connie and I have literally been immersed in this world for 8 years. We have colleagues all over the world, not just the 78 people I've interviewed, but people like Dwayne and Coleen. And this documentary that Colleen created is the best of the best of the best. Seriously, it's our favorite thing to introduce people to the reality of climate change, abrupt climate change, the potential for extinction, but also the potential for transformation. So please watch it, and then share it with others. It's awesome.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Michael.
I'm so glad you jumped in, Michael. That's great. So Nina and Anne Marie, and we're getting close to the end of our time for this evening. So sadly, but Nina, go ahead.
First, really quickly, I just want to thank you so much for everything you've done. The book is really touching, and just even being here to speak with us. What I wanted to ask about is, in talking about the stages of grief and all that, it's clear just observing the world today that there's a significant number of people that are still in the denial mode. And I mean, we're not going to get anything done if we don't get past that. So any thoughts or ideas on how we help people get past the denial mode?
I think Colleen's film is, as Michael was suggesting, is such a compassionate and approachable way of entering into what is happening to us now in the world. There's a lot of hard-edged science films out there in the world. This has that edge, but it brings a soft humanity and love and compassion to it. So I think that is the kind of communication that's vital for us to actually say, okay, I'm entering into this now with my heart, my soul, and my intellect, and my true gifts. So it's that kind of thing that I think is required to make that opening.
And educating yourself so you're clear and it's coming from, deep in your own integration of what's happening. And sometimes it requires tough love. I mean, we just had a family member make a comment to us about the fires. Well, it's just cyclic. And I had to just say, it's not this time. It's going to get worse and it's going to continue. And because I know that from the research. And so sometimes you have to and it might shock somebody, but hey, we're in danger here. So as much with love, but also sometimes you just have to say the truth in the moment and let them grapple a little bit and give resources.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Anne Marie.
Yes, I'm curious where you're taking the Choosing Earth project, the direction you're taking it, and what impact you are looking to have. Just curious, what type of participation and direction.
Great. Well, if we had another hour or two, Okay, direction. I'm passionate about communication and visualization. I'm passionate about taking the insights developed over decades that are now embodied in the book Choosing Earth, and saying to people in Hollywood, turn it into a movie, turn it into a whole series of movies and such. I'm passionate about going to the news media in New York and elsewhere and saying, turn it into a scenario, a documentary of showing what we're up against and the transition dynamics that might emerge. I'm passionate about having people, as I mentioned earlier, Greta and the Extinction Rebellion, having them go directly to the powers that be in the mass media, in broadcast television and elsewhere, and say, do your job. Let's start communicating about these things, not just in the small enclaves, but as a whole society. We can do that. We have the tools right now. I'm passionate about holding the mass media accountable for its legal responsibilities. And so going beyond just kind of encouragement and wouldn't you please, to say, no, this is your legal responsibility and your responsibility to the well-being of the earth and our future. It's time to move into a more aggressive, in a more demanding and in a more assertive way of bringing these insights, these understandings to the world. And it's not to pound on people, but it's rather to welcome people into a much larger conversation. That's where I want to see this going. And Colleen has another track that she's been working on for years now on the education, the teaching and such. And that's another track of where this is going. So Colleen, do you want to speak about that?
Well, we've been developing kind of a course around choosing Earth, and we have worked with and trained facilitators, and Marianne's been teaching it. There are other people out there teaching it now. So that's one small scale, way of organizing, getting people deeper, taking 7 weeks to go through a course where you really absorb it and read the book during the same time. I think there's more films in our future, short ones. I don't want to do another long one like that. That film was a challenge for me. It just, it had to be done, and it was one of service that I felt needed to be done. And I'd like to look at some of the more, the trust of the life, of life, and how we can engage people. How can we get people, what is short, very short films that can kind of help wake people up to their role in this, that they are part of it, whether they are recognizing that or not. So I think we have some more films in there. We're developing a community. We have, a monthly group that's meeting. So it's very much, we've been in a kind of seed phase, and now we've got the book and the film, and we've got a curriculum for the course. We have facilitators, and so that's all going out into the world now.
Wonderful. So we just have time for one more question, and I'll take that one from the chat. But those of you who have questions that we haven't had time for, please write them in the chat, and then we're going to save the chat, and I will send the chat, or at least the questions, to Dwayne and Colleen, and they've graciously agreed to look at that and answer what they can. And so they'll send them back to me, and I'll send them out to folks, so that if we didn't have time for your question, then please put it in the chat, and we'll do what we can to touch in with that. So I think this is an excellent question to be our final one for this evening. This comes from Kristen Fletcher, and she asks to ask you, where do you find hope?
Well, hope. That's an important word. Kierkegaard said, hope is a passion for the possible. It's not saying this is guaranteed, it's going to happen for sure, this, that. No, it's to say, is this possible that we can mature as a species, that we can go through this rite of passage, this time of collective initiation as a human family and become stewards of a sustainable and compassionate world. And I think it's possible. And so in that regard, and as Kierkegaard said, I'm very hopeful because this is possible. We have not yet closed out our future into one of just complete ruin. So that's one place, just in that understanding that the potential is still very much alive to move creatively ahead. And then I take hope from all the folks like on this call. And seeing the lights in people's eyes and the warmth and love in their hearts, and knowing, well, yeah, if we pull that kind of energy and capacity together, you bet I'm hopeful. So it's working with people, working with communities around the world. That's one of the big gifts of doing this work, is to see there are people all around the planet that would be completely resonant with the conversation being offered here. So there are multiple sources of hope, of potential, of possibility that I draw upon. And then the idea that the universe as a living system is sustaining us, that underneath the adversity is great opportunity and the aliveness of a regenerative universe. And we just need to open to that love and aliveness that's there and draw that into a promising potential. Colleen.
Well, I guess I would reframe it as trust, really what Molly brought up, trust in this life, just really having trust in it. And for me, that comes from both the outer, like being on this planet, this profound gift in nature, connecting with the living world and all the beings here, but also the inner side. There's a whole universe inside as well. And I feel like, as Dwayne has pointed out, with the percentages of what we can see and what we can know, it's so much bigger. And I think that falling in love with the planet is probably the best thing, and all of life. If we could fall in love with life, we would do so much better. So it needs to be a love affair. Let's fall in love with each other, with life, with everything that's been given to us, and just really gratitude. That would do so much. I'm working on it. I'm a beginner too. So, but that's really, I think, where the hope comes from.
Yeah, well said.
Well said indeed, both of you. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The parting suggestion or invitation is to go outside and fall in love with it all, and then from there, it springs eternal. So, as I said, if you have questions that you've not had an opportunity to ask, then please put those in the chat, and we will do what we can to get those answered so that everyone can hear. I have a couple of announcements. In the next couple of days, all of you will receive an email that includes links related to what we've been discussing, a list of opportunities for further study, for community action, and for coming together, and a recording of the call. And Monterey Bay Meditation Studio and Dwayne and Colleen welcome you to share the video with others. Please giving acknowledgement to Monterey Bay Meditation Studio and to the Choosing Earth Project, that this is a gift for the world to be shared. And speaking of gifts, just a reminder that this event is offered through the spirit of reciprocity of gift economy. And most of the proceeds from contributions will go to the Choosing Earth Project. So a link for contributing will be on the upcoming email. Or you can find that link on the Monterey Bay Meditation Studio website, which is montereybaymeditation.com. So, with a deep inhalation and exhalation, I'd like to express gratitude, deep and profound gratitude to all of the participants here for making space and time to explore this evening with all of us together. I'd like to express gratitude and a bow to Rebecca for handling the tech all the way through. And then, of course, a respect, express gratitude and a bow so deep it becomes a somersault to Dwayne and Colleen for your being in this world.
And a big bow to you, Marianne, for pulling all this together and just showing up the way you do with so much light and love. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And thank you to everyone on this call. Thank you for showing up in this way. I've really been touched, moved, and nurtured by your presence. Thank you.
Yay. Wonderful. So I'll offer a closing quote and ask Dwayne or Colleen for dedication from the evening. And then I'm going to open the chat so that folks can say their whatever they want to say in the chat before we sign off. So, closing quote by this gentleman named Dwayne Elgin from this book called Choosing Earth. Taking a deep breath. We stand upon the earth as agents of self-reflective and creative action who are engaged in a time of great transition and conscious learning to live in a living universe. An ancient Greek saying speaks directly to our learning journey. Light your candle before night overtakes you. Thanks to Dwayne, thanks to the Greeks. Dwayne and or Colleen, would you this evening?
That was a great ending.
Yeah, I know.
That lighting of the candle, I think that's, you said it all. Thank you.
Thank you, Marianne.
So let me see if I can open the chat and give y'all a chance. And you can unmute. It doesn't even be that you have to write it. You can unmute yourselves and say your goodbyes or whatever you want to express.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Dwayne and Colleen.
Just
Thank
absolute.
you, everyone.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Marianne.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Merci beaucoup.
Beautiful.
Thank you all for showing up.
Thank you for the guidance
Thank you.
and the sharing.
Very, very rich.
Thank you for the hope.
The perspective. Thank you.
Until we meet again.
I like that waving goodbye.
Hi, Dahlia.
Do this on my front porch. No, bye. Au revoir.
I want to see that somersault. I want to see that somersault.
Yay. Wonderful.
Your internet held, Marianne.
It was great to see you all, reflecting your hope with the connection. I really appreciate that. We were all drawn into it.
Great.
Thank you.
Great.
Good to see you.
I think
Run out to a grandson's birthday party right now.
Ooh, what fun. Bingo tonight.
Thank you both, and we're looking forward to watching Colleen's film.
Great.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, very much.
All right.
All right.
Well, you're talking about education. You can get into the public schools curricula and that sort of thing. That's
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah,
Wilford's working on that, I believe.
he
Yeah.
is, with
Mhm.
teachers. Yep.
Mhm. Mhm.
All
thank you.
right,
All
we're gonna
right.
say goodnight.
All right. Good night, Mike. Good night, Eva. Good night, Anu. Good night, Melody.
Good
Yes.
night.
Rebecca, can you check and see if I've saved the chat? Way of checking.
Well, so I saved it and then I opened what I saved and it doesn't include anything that was sent to you. So I think you have to separately save it on your computer.
Oh, okay. So
It only saved the stuff that was sent to me.
okay. All right. So let's see if I can save it. And I'll just make double sure here. Yeah. So we'll keep our fingers crossed that that works. And okay. All right. And I'm going to stop the recording. And